talk. Short 30 minutes presentation, and then follow up with 30 minutes of discussion. We would like to approach your kindness once more and ask for a note taker before we start. Do we have any volunteers?
I guess anybody can also write it on the chat throughout the presentation.
Yes.
May work well.
If you want to. Okay, then, I mean, shall we start and then wait for someone to volunteer? Okay.
Yes, go for it.
Okay, so let me, before I introduce the speaker, let me just remind you, we'll have a 30-minute session of the presentation and then an hour of a discussion on various topics where you can also ask questions about the talk. And let me also remind you the working groups that we have where you can go. I mean, this will, the discussion and then the work through these will continue after these sessions as well. So you can go there and make an opinion, define a goal, milestones, etc. And I mean, all the links are, you can follow directly from the main link that Daniel specified at the beginning. Okay, so without further ado, are we ready? Good. So I'm very happy to introduce our first speaker today, Jiwon Lee. So Jiwon is a PhD student in information systems engineering in Hanyang University in South Korea. So basically it's very late for him right now. He's supervised by Yoonok Oh, also at the same place, information systems engineering. And his research interests include applied cryptography, including public key encryption and zero knowledge proof, and secure system designs. So, Jiwon, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Let me share my screen now. Can everybody see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, I take that as a yes. Okay, so Saber is a joint work between Jae-kyung Choi, Ji-hae Kim, and Hyunwook Oh, which from Hanyang University and Kookmin University based in South Korea. Oh, and before I start my talk, I will just mention one thing, that our Saber is more like a specific scheme proposal. So, but we all know that this workshop is about making a great standard, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'll split the talk into two parts. So first I'll explain what the Saber is about. And then I want to open up some, introduce some basic and general ideas that lie behind the scheme, so that it would be really great for all of us to discuss on what to consider when you're making standards. Okay, so let us begin. So the Saber is a verifiable encryption scheme, and each letter in the Saber actually means something. It means the satisfying property in Saber. So Saber is SNARK-friendly, and it's an additively-homomorphic scheme, and also it's a verifiable encryption, and it also supports a verifiable decryption. And then finally, it has a re-randomization process. So yeah, part one about Saber. So Saber is a verifiable encryption scheme, as I told you. So let's start with introducing what the verifiable encryption really is. So by the definition, it's an encryption scheme which proves that a ciphertext encrypts a plaintext, but satisfying a certain relation R. The definition is taken from the Kamenishi and Shup's paper from 2004. And what they're doing is they are proving that the ciphertext is generated correctly and within a certain format, like for example, a discrete log format, which contains the certainty M inside a G to the M. In this case, it's really useful for some environments where we require a trust for the encryptor. For example, like key escrows or group signature schemes. So in common sense, the verifiable encryption are kind of fixing the relation for focusing on the validity of the encryption right now. But when we look at the definition, we can be more creative and we don't need to restrict the relation to just the validity of the encryption. We can actually basically prove anything what we want, right? So what happens is I want to say that when you combine the ZK SNARK with the encryption, then it can be a universal verifiable encryption, which can encrypt while proving any arbitrary properties of the message what you want. So for example, if you want to like prove some specific properties what you want, you can just set the relation from the ZK SNARK, and it's going to automatically prove that the message automatically proves the certain property that you set as a relation. And this primitive can be actually really useful for many practical applications when we think for some examples. Here are some motivative examples that I'm providing. So first one would be e-commerce system. Let's say Alice here wants to buy the product, which is a movie rental product from for example, Amazon. And she wants to just verify that if the encrypted product certainly has some valid rental period or some legitimate copyright inside a message. But in this case, verifiable encryption can easily provide the platform, because only thing we have to do is encrypt the message by setting the relation as the requirement Alice is asking for. Also, the next one is a contract management system. And let's say the contractors are making a contract, but there is a third-party government who wants to support some contractors who satisfy the certain requirements that the government is stating. So let's say, for example, the government wants to support some mortgage loaners within this year and whose deposit is under like $10,000. Then in this case, what you can do is the contractors can encrypt their contract. And so they don't have to rebuild the contract message itself, but they can verify and say the government, okay, my contract satisfies your requirements. And if we take this to more an advanced level, we don't have to restrict the properties just for the message. Actually, we can prove some properties that is linked to the message itself. What I'm saying is, for example, in the voting system, if we think about proving the voter's membership inside a membership test, which is linked to the votes, then what we can do is we can prove that the voter is within the certain membership that what we want. So it means the voter has a voting right. And also, of course, you can set the relation for original message, the vote. For example, you can set the relation as validity of the votes, saying that the sum of the vote is integer 1, which indicates that 1 vote for each one candidate. So now we all understand and agree that universal verifiable encryption can be useful. Then how do we construct it? Well, easy way we can think of is we can just encode everything inside a ZK SNARK, which we call as an encryption in the circuit approach. So what happens is that we are placing the whole encryption process inside a circuit. Then we can just prove the arbitrary property what we want. And then we are also doing the encryption inside a circuit. And ZK SNARK is going to prove that the property satisfies and also encryption is done in the right way. But the question here is it really okay to do this? Well, for simple encryption, maybe acceptable, but of course it's not really efficient. Because like, for example, if we're doing the RSA inside the Graph 16 of the Leap SNARK, it takes like about 9 seconds for proving time and more than 200 megabytes for the common reference string. But the problem is, if we need more than a simple encryption, let's say we need more functionalities. For example, if we need like identity-based encryption or attribute-based encryption to be included in the circuit, then here we need some more advanced cryptographic mathematics like pairings. So it's going to explode the circuit a lot, which can be really unrealistically heavy. So this is not really what we want, right? So how to make it better? The idea is we can detach the encryption from the SNARK circuit. What it means is that we are encrypting outside of the circuit, but we are letting it be compatible with the ZK SNARK. But in this case, what becomes important is that we need a connectivity between the encryption and the ZK SNARK since we separated them. What the connectivity means that we have to make sure that the prover uses the same message input for both the encryption and for the ZK SNARK. Then how do we check this connectivity? Well, the idea is that when we look at the message itself is the input to the SNARK. So when we look at the SNARKs are all from linear encodings, which look like G to the M. And it kind of looks like, already, we all know that it looks like a Peterson commitment, and also which can be viewed as an exponential version of L-gamma encryption. So it seems possible to design a ciphertext compatible with the input-output of the SNARK verification. What it means is that you have a ciphertext, but if you can transform it to some shape of the input output that is used in the SNARK verification, and if the verification passes, that means that you are already using the same message both to the ciphertext in the input output of the ZK SNARK circuit, which can connect them. Actually, this can be understood as an extension of the commit carrying SNARK. If you're already familiar with the technique, it's from the Lego SNARK paper. And but we are extending the CC SNARK to the encryption version. So now this is pretty much what we call a SNARK-friendly encryption. It's a concept where it's a universal verifiable encryption, which we can prove for arbitrary properties. And it can be connected to the SNARK verification outside of the circuit, of course, by avoiding the encryption in the circuit. So we would like to call this concept a SNARK-friendly encryption. And based on this concept, what we did is that we devised a specific scheme named as a saver, which has some other useful functionalities other than the simple encryption. And to prove the usefulness, we designed an application called Vote Saver, which is based on constructed by using the scheme saver. So what happens in the formal construction, I wouldn't go deep dive into it, but just a brief idea. Oh, and first of all, just most of the audience, you can ignore what's coming out on the Blackboard. It's just for someone who really want to know what's going on, like in the mathematical details, but it's not really necessary to understand them at all. Anyway, so for the scheme, we use the GROS16 for the ZK SNARK, but particularly you can use all the like GROS16 like pre-processing SNARKs. They're quite in a similar form, so you can just use it. So what happens is that for the encryption setup, you are actually setting up the GROS16 CRS. And then after that, you are using the common reference string as an ingredient for the public key of the encryption so that it can be connected later in the SNARK parameters. And also we require to split the message actually into n small blocks because of course, because we are using the exponential version of the L-gamma encryption, and it means that we have to find the discrete log of the element. So it means that we are splitting the message when we're encrypting. And in decryption, what happens is that you have to get the element which has an exponent of m, and then we're going to find a short space discrete log of the message, and then you are going to like put it all together to retrieve the original message again. Okay, so we are ready to encrypt. Well, encryption goes like this. I already mentioned this before as an idea. You are using the IO-shaped message inside the ciphertext. But what happens is that you also need another random to be a public key encryption. So you need the shared random R for all the message spaces, and then individual random S for like each spaces. Then later in the verification, what happens is that you are plugging in the ciphertext instead of the input output of the SNARK in the equality check. Then here, you all notice that we have some unnecessary random that is mixed into the ciphertext. So we also have to modify some proof to cross out these unnecessary randoms. And at the end of the day, what we get is the same equality check, same as in the GROS16 verification. So if this verification passes with using the ciphertext, then it can automatically guarantee that we are already using the same message for both SNARK and encryption, which can connect them. So this is basically pretty much it, the main idea for the saver. And it also provides some other useful functionalities other than just a simple encryption. The first one is additive homomorphism, but this is quite obvious because we're already using the exponential L-gamma encryption, which has a linearity. But the second one is that we are providing the verifiable decryption functionality. It means that it has a verify decrypt function, which can verify that the uniqueness of the decrypted plaintext, but without using the secret key, of course. If you have the secret key, you can just decrypt it and check it. But let's say there's some third party who doesn't have the secret key, but still want to know that the plaintext that is supposed to be decrypted is certainly linked to the ciphertext that you're looking at. Then in this case, verifiable decryption can be actually useful. And also Saber provides the re-randomization, which is the ciphertext and proof is re-randomizable so that they can be unlinkable to the original one within the same distribution. So this is all what the Saber is about. So we can think of where is it useful then? Well, for this, we made an application, which is a vote saver. This is a voting system built from the Saber scheme. So the main idea, actually, I mentioned it before in the application examples. The idea is that we are encrypting the votes, but we are also proving the voter's right by doing the membership test using the zero cache. So by doing this, we could gain a lot of useful properties by using the saver. So first, we use the blockchain for the public bulletin board of the results. So it provides a non-malleability. And first of all, it's providing the receive freeness for the votes. It means that the voter cannot reproduce the vote himself for vote buying or some other avoiding from the coercing entities. And this is done by the re-randomization of the saver. So what happens is that the votes can be re-randomized, so the voter cannot reproduce without knowing the random R. And by satisfying the receive freeness, but also vote saver provides the individual verifiability, which means that still the voter can at least ensure that his vote was included in the results. And this is done by the nature of the verifiable encryption, because even though the vote is re-randomized, still, if it passes the verification, it means that it's still containing the original message as the voter intended for. So the next one is the universal verifiability. Because of the additive homomorphism and the verifiable decryption, anyone can check the validity of the tally results by just summing up all the ciphertext that was uploaded on the blockchain. And then by using the decryption proof from the manager, everybody can check the result is certainly from the ciphertext that exists on the blockchain. And what's important is that the vote saver provides the voter anonymity and the non-repudiation gained by ZK SNARK. So the first one, anonymity, means that the voter's identity is hidden even from any authority. And this is really important. This means that the voter is the only one who is responsible for keeping his secret key. No authority cannot know the secret key of the voter. So it can provide the anonymity of the voter by using the zero knowledge of the ZK SNARK. And also this means that the voter is the only one who can generate the votes by using his own secret key. So it can also provide a non-repudiation by the soundness of the ZK SNARK. So here's the framework explanation to show you what is really going on. So let's assume as a background, everybody, the user, is publishing their public key by hashing their own secret key by their own. It's just the same as using the protocol in the zero cache actually. So let's say Alice and Bob here is publishing their public key. And then we also have the common reference string for the relation for the voting, which is a membership test and the validity check. So when the election manager, which we call administrator, wants to initiate the election, the first thing she's going to do is she's going to select the list of the voters. And when the list is finalized, she's going to make the Merkle tree root of all the lists. And then she's going to generate the key by using the saver's keygen and get the public key and the verification key for this specific election. And then of course, she's going to keep the secret key for the tallying later, which can be used as the election key. And in the voting process, what happens is that the voter is going to use her the secret key as a witness to the ZK SNARK, as same as in zero cache. So in here, the secret key is hidden, and he is encrypting the vote as a ciphertext and the proof. And the vote consists of the serial number to avoid the duplicate, and the proof and the ciphertext. And the vote is going to be sent to the blockchain network, which is going to the miners. Then what the miner does is they are going to just check if the vote is valid by verifying it or verifying if they are not duplicate. And then what really happens is that they're going to re-randomize the vote to be a new vote. And then they are going to upload it to the blockchain. But here, what voter can do is that by serial number, he can know at least that the vote is uploaded on the blockchain. And then he's going to do the verify encryption of the saver. Then if the verification passes, that means even if the vote is re-randomized, still there is a certain message that the voter has intended for when he was voting. So he can say, okay, at least my vote is re-randomized, but still my vote is inside the results. So this is the end of the voting process. And after all the votes are finalized, what happens is that everybody can get the sum of the ciphertext since all the ciphertexts are already uploaded into the blockchain. And then the election manager, the administrator, is going to decrypt the ciphertext by using the election key she has. And then she's going to let the message out to everybody. And then, but also she's going to output the decryption proof, which can be used by everybody to see that this message is certainly linked to the ciphertext that was on the blockchain. So this is it. Then what is really different from other systems? The first one is the the vote saver is providing receipt freeness also with all the verifiabilities. Say the vote is receipt free because the vote is re-randomized by the blockchain miners, but also it is providing the verifiability of individual and universal, and even you can verify that the vote doesn't contain any error by just setting up the relation in the ZK SNARK for the voting validity. But this is not really kind of a novel technique because it is an already existing technique for some systems. But what is really important is, as far as I know, the vote saver is the first scheme to provide only the voter is the secret key holder, which means that in other systems, they're somehow compromising the privacy by letting the authority distribute the key for the election. So it means at least the authority knows where the vote is originated from, or they can even make some proxy votes. But in the vote saver, even the authority cannot identify the voter, and by the non-repudiation, it means no one can make actually malicious proxy votes for the voter. Okay, so this is it for the vote saver. So to verify the practicality, we implemented the saver scheme on the real Linux machine by modifying the JSNARK. And of course, we set the relation as a vote saver, which consists of the membership test and the validity of the votes. And the membership test is constructed from the ITI hash tree of the Hi16. So here are the main results. As you can see, we split the message to the small spaces, right? So as the message grows, you can see that encryption is more blocks to be encrypted. It's increasing. But you can see that it's really, really efficient compared to the proving relation. And of course, if this encryption was inside the Krawczyk circuit, it's going to explode a lot. So you have to look at encryption added to the proving time total as a saver's encryption. So I think this is pretty much it. So the source code is available on the GitHub, and we also made some cute example demo system on the website. So it's available on the links as below. So if you feel interested, you can feel free to go in and see what's really going on. Okay, so here's the summary of the contributions. So Saver is a universal verifiable encryption, which can prove any properties of the message. And it's also SNARK-friendly to encrypt outside a circuit and connect to the ZK SNARK later. And Saver also provides some other useful functionalities, such as re-randomization or verifiable decryption. And for the security, it provides a formal proof for knowledge soundness and semantic security and etc. And we designed the vote saver, which is a specific noble application where the voter holds the secret key for himself. And finally, we implemented the saver and gained the experimental results. And actually, we made a real demo system. Okay, so I guess this is end of part one. And now, as I mentioned, I'll introduce some basic and general ideas so we can all discuss about what we can consider in the making the standards. So first idea is SNARK-friendly extension, as in lifting transformation. Say the saver is a specific scheme with just specific functionalities like re-randomization, right? But we should think about, can it be applied to other encryptions also? Like, for example, can it be SNARK-friendly IBE or can it be SNARK-friendly ABEs? Well, all these kind of advanced encryption, if they're based on the pairing groups, like elliptic curve group, I think they're possible because fundamentally it's in the same way. You can just split the message and connect them as in Saber, but of course you have to put the message on the group element G, as in the exponential version of the algorithm encryption. But one thing you also have to consider is that there are some additional features in this kind of encryption. Like, for example, there is an identity in the IBE, an attribute in the ABE. So these can be also an input to the SNARK. So you also have to consider connecting them as well. So what happens is that, let's say we are building a SNARK-friendly IBE, then you are proving both statement for ID and the message. And then later, this ID and message is already included in the ciphertext. So we want to connect it to the ZK SNARK to ensure that you are using the same ID and for both ZK SNARK and the IBE. Well, by doing this, we can think of also possibility of devising a general technique like a lifting transformation. Say we have any encryption scheme based on pairing groups, and if we can apply this extension technique, then we can just easily lift it to SNARK-friendly encryption. Well, if this is possible, maybe we can debate on what to standardize on. If it should be general, like an extension technique, or it should be specific to like SNARK-friendly IBEs and ABEs and each. And also the next one is if the SNARK-friendly encryption or the technique can be gained from other existing zero-knowledge proofs or SNARKs. Like say, because we in the saver, we just use the GRAS16 and pre-processing SNARKs, but we should think about, is it really compatible with other examples like or Sonics or Plunks and etc. Well, the answer would be yes, if they are based on the pairing groups. Of course, Sonic and Plunk, I think is compatible because like when you're doing the opening in the polynomial commitment, you can actually adjust some parameters so that the input output can be plugged in to the verification and you can just cross out the randoms by doing some adjustments. But for other groups, like for example, Dark compiler is using the class group and like Stark is using the Frybase. Well, this is not compatible right now, but maybe if we have a connection between these groups and to the elliptic curve pairing groups, well, of course, it should be connectable. And one more thing I'd like to mention is we should think about SNARK-friendly system, as in anything. It can be verification or membership test. I don't know what it's going to be. We can be creative. There's tons and tons of systems other than like crypto systems. It can be any application what we want. So it's all about focusing on the connectivity between the SNARK and the system that we are choosing. So for example, let's say SNARK-friendly verification. I don't know if it can even exist, but we have to like make the protocol for this. But let's say we need signature verification to be included in the ZK SNARK circuit, but maybe we can just separate the verification from the circuit. And let's say we have some, hypothetically, a blinded message, like a commitment or encryption, I don't know. But if we can verify it outside and then connect it to the ZK SNARK, maybe it can be more efficient than including verification inside the circuit. Well, of course, you can think about the SNARK-friendly membership test, which is already an accumulate and prove technique. It's the same thing. If you have an accumulator type of the membership test, you can just connect it to the ZK SNARK and be more efficient. And I think it's, yes, this can be included by the talk which Matteo mentioned in his talk, by what to standardize in the commit and prove system. I think this is the same thing. It's a good point to categorize and standardize what SNARK-friendly system we want to introduce in the standardization. The last point is intersection with the commit and prove. So actually from the viewpoint of the commit and prove system, it actually already includes what we call the SNARK-friendly technique, because the SNARK-friendly technique is fundamentally an extension of the commit carrying SNARK, which was from the Lego SNARK. But there is some kind of details that is not mentioned. I would like to just carve up some details by separating the category. Let's say there is the most general one, which is commit and prove. So this is about being most general. You even don't know what you're going to do, what you're going to X, and what you are going to prove. You don't know anything. Then in this case, you have to commit something to the value. And then later, you have to decide what you're going to do. Like say, let's for example, say X is encryption. Then you are doing the encryption, and then you are doing the proof. And later in the check, what you need is that you need to check the connectivity both between ciphertext and commitment, and also the check between commitment and the proof to make sure that you are using M for both commitment, ciphertext, and proof. The next one is in the middle. Let's say this is X and proof. I don't know how to name it, but it's quite in the middle. So you are aware of what you're going to do. You know you're going to do X. So in this case, you don't need to really commit something, because you can just make the ciphertext, the encryption, as compatible to the proof, like if they are sharing some M inside the exponents. But still in here, what you require is that you are not aware of what you're going to prove. So which means later in the check, you have to check that the ciphertext and the proof is sharing the same message inside the exponents. And this is the least general one, but of course is the most practical one. What is we call the SNARK-friendly encryption right now. So here you already know what you're going to do. You already know you're going to encrypt, and you already know what you're going to prove. So you're doing it at the same time. Only thing you need is the connectivity between them. That in this case, you don't even need the commits, and you don't need to check anything additionally. You are just doing the encryption and the proof at the same time. But you can just plug in the encryption to the SNARK verification right away. So it means that you don't need any additional checks. So it can be very practical for the specific cases. So here are the summary of discussions briefly. Just I talked about the SNARK-friendly encryptions for other encryptions like IBEs and ABEs. And also if the SNARK-friendly encryption can be gained from other SNARKs. And if SNARK-friendly technique for other systems, should we standardize and consider other systems? And alas, from the viewpoint of the commit and prove, the SNARK-friendly technique is already included. So should we like carve some details into the working group of the commit and prove? I don't know this. So it would be a great timing to discuss all about it. So I guess this is the end of my talk. So this would be a nice timing to ask questions. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jiwon. Okay, so we had some questions from the audience. Kobe, would you like to ask your question, please?
Sure. So when you presented that verified decryption allows you to show that a plain text corresponds to some ciphertext without revealing the secret key, of course. I was wondering whether you can do that, like whether Saver specifically supports verified decryption against a commitment rather than a plain text, so that you can prove that the commitment contains the correct decryption of this ciphertext.
So you're saying you are not looking at the plain text, but you're looking at some commitments, but you have to make sure that the commitment is coming from the ciphertext. Am I understanding the question correct?
Yes, exactly. The commitment contains the value which the ciphertext decrypts to, yes. Like, is that something that Saver does, or is it unrelated?
I think it's unrelated, but I think it's more related to the commit and prove actually, because you are kind of making the relation between the commit and some value that you are trying to prove, right? So I think it's more related to the commit and prove, but the Saver doesn't provide some kind of properties like that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think maybe if I can add to that, just to follow up, like it's interesting that when the way you presented, you want the commit and prove, it seems like when you have commit ahead of time, and then you want to prove some property, that property could be anything. And it could be also some SNARK-friendly or X and prove of that specific value under the commitment, right? And then you could also sort of, right, then if you say, okay, I want to prove encryption, then you do the encrypt and prove on that commit and prove. I don't know if it's maybe too convoluted for what I'm saying, but it's it sort of makes sense, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for the heads up, Daniel.
Okay, thank you. Tamara, can you pose your question, please?
Oh, sorry, but should I stop sharing my screen now?
I mean, I think it's great because you actually summarized all the points for discussion. So if you don't mind.
Oh, okay. I'll just keep it on then.
It's great that it's in front of us.
Okay, sorry for interrupting. Go on for the question.
To support Saver, should we modify TRS?
Can you say that again?
Some additional parameters. Should we add something to set up?
Yes, of course, because as I told you, let's see the details on the mathematics. So here, when the encryption is happening, you see there's some randoms that should be crossed out in the verification, right? Later, we have to cross out some randoms by modifying the proof. So it means that we also have to add the G to the minus gamma, which should be used to cross out the random later. So we are adding the G to the inverse gamma inside the CRS of the graph 16.
Okay, thank you. We had another question maybe from G. Yeah, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, hi. Can you ask a question, please, or make a comment?
Sorry. I'm one of the authors for this proposal.
Were you asking something on the chat? Because I wasn't looking at the chat.
I think maybe.
I'm checking the chat because there are some papers.
Was the answer to another comment maybe? Like Tamara asked, voter cannot cancel her vote.
Yes, it looks like Jihye was commenting to the other questions.
I see. I see. Okay. Okay, I thought you were
Okay.
wondering whether that's the case. Okay. So there's another discussion. Kobe, do you want to comment anything about your the ePrint that you mentioned?
Oh no, it's fine. Just commenting on some of the desirable properties that Jiwon was mentioning about membership and like how to detach membership from the SNARK. That's fine.
Okay, good. Also, Karim, is it follow-up to Kobe's point?
No, actually, I wanted to mention that we already have this technique in commit and proof by SNARKs that I have cited this paper that I had it in 2019, and I showed that when you basically use SNARK with encryption, basically you can look at it as a commit and proof system. But I was surprised that it's not mentioned here, but you can see the discussion in that paper. Basically, when you have encryption by SNARK proof, so basically since you generate them together, so you can send this encryption first as a commitment, and later whenever you want to open, you can send the proof, and they will basically show as an opening for that encryption. Just I wanted to comment about this note that they said we have it in here in Saver. Yeah, I hope they can discuss about it also in later day version.
Okay, thanks for the comments. But just to be clear, I would like to be clear on the understanding. So you're saying that
maybe I can share. Yeah, may I share? Oh,
yes, it would be best if you can share the screen and explain what it is about.
Yes, I can show
Really
it. Yeah,
okay,
basically.
I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, can you see my slides and my page now, my screen?
Not yet. It's not coming up.
Okay. Now? Okay, so yeah, when you want to basically define a relation like this, let me show it here. So you have some encryption with the SNARKs. As you mentioned, maybe it's not efficient, but the idea would work that you define encryption and you give a proof with encryption for that one. Basically, finally, you have a pi prime, which pi prime is a C. You can look at it as a commitment, and pi is a proof for that encryption. Basically, this gives a proof that C has the same witness inside proof. And I have mentioned in page 5 that this can be like as a commit and proof system, but I saw that it's not as flexible as the ones that you can modify the proofs. In page 5, we have discussed it here, that this can be used as a commit and proof system as proofers and the encryption of witness either than, separate than proof elements. I want to just discuss this, that this is quite relevant to the topic.
So in this case, is the message considered as a witness inside of the
you can actually model it as a witness as a message, but you can also define a new one. I mean, basically you want to say that, I have the same, in this paper, the target was not that one, just I wanted to say that if you look at to the SNARKs and from this point of view, you can look at it as a proof and commit, but in that construction, witness and message were the same.
Okay, so now I think I understand some part of it. So there certainly is an intersection. Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, just it was a comment. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for the comments, and yeah, I'll make sure to read the paper and add some comments on it.
Thank you, Karim.
You're welcome.
Good. Tamara had another question.
I think that's the question that was asked
the same?
before.
No, it's another one, I think.
So yeah, the one before was answered by someone else. Anyway, I think, yeah.
Okay. Good. Abhilash?
Yeah, hi. The question is, you had shown a flowchart in case of the water saver, the miner can actually modify or re-randomize some of the components. So what is the probability that there is an adversary and then they try to change the serial number as well, because that's very important for future verification?
I would say that implies to the soundness of the ZK SNARK, because you have to make another proof that can be out of the relation, actually, doesn't it? Is that what you're asking for? Like, if you can make other serial number that is which is not in the relation but still can be verified?
Right. Who would be able to validate it? Let us say the serial number is modified while they are modifying other parameters during re-randomization. How would you ensure that that doesn't take place?
So it's for that we are proving that the soundness still holds for the encryption and the soundness in the saver. So it means that if you are going to create another serial number, and if that's the question, I mean, if you are modifying the serial number, that is going to break the relation that is going to verify it in the SNARK. So it basically cannot be modified if you don't know the witness, which is the secret key, which only the voter knows.
Okay.
All right, thank you. We had another question by Remy. Hopefully I'm pronounced it correctly.
Is it Guillaume?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so yeah, my question is also linked to this serial number. So I don't understand how you can achieve like a receipt freeness, because the voter can always prove that he has a witness for the serial number.
So you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking the serial number is deterministic. So how can it be receipt free? Is it correct?
Yes.
Yes, so serial number, of course, is deterministic, but the vote itself, the serial number does not indicate the vote. The vote consists of the proof and the ciphertext, and the serial number is only known to the voter who knows the secret key as a witness. So the vote, which is a proof, and the ciphertext, if let's say the voter wants to reproduce the votes for the vote buying, let's say, then he has to know the random that was used in the re-randomization, which was handled by the blockchain miner. So he doesn't know the R, which was used in the re-randomization. So at the end, you cannot produce the pi and the ciphertext that was which is the vote. But still, this is actually a good question, because the deterministic property of the serial number is what it makes avoid the coercion resistance. The saver is not coercion resistant, because we all know that their serial number is deterministic. And if you know the secret key, of course, you know the serial number. That means if you have the perfect course against the voter himself, and if you just extract the secret key of the voter, then you can just identify the serial number, and at the end of the day, you know what the voter is.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Daira had 2 questions.
Yes, so there are actually several bugs in the published Zero Cash protocol, which are described in the Zcash protocol spec. There's a few errors in the proofs. There's quite a serious bug in the commitment construction from SHA-256 that would have been a 2 to the 64 work attack. And there's another bug which applies in the cryptocurrency context. I'm not sure whether it applies to vote saver, which is that you can make notes that that can't both be spent. It's called a fairy gold bug. So did you look at those bugs in Zero Cash and fix them in your implementation?
To be honest, I'm not really familiar with the bugs, but we are taking the concept of the Zero Cash, but we just use the Merkle tree membership test, just the concept of it. Right. So I wouldn't say there is a bug inside.
The other question I had was why Ashte hashes and not say Pedersen or some of the more recent
The main reason is we're doing it inside a circuit, as you can see as a membership test. So yeah, Ashte hash was the fastest one when we're proving with the ZK SNARK.
Yeah, I think so. We rejected that because we couldn't find any sort of publication or strong opinion about which parameters were secure.
I totally agree, because we cannot be 100% sure of the security, of course.
Yeah, so that's why we ended up with Peterson, because its security is reducible to discrete log.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay, I think we ran out of questions. We can switch to discussion. Anyone else has anything to ask before I'll start proposing topics? Okay. Jiwon, maybe you can share your last slide again.
Okay.
Very useful to look at the topics.
Okay, so is it showing now?
Yes, great. Thank you very much. So anything about the type of encryption scheme was used in Saber, and can we extend this to other schemes?
So we should, I think the first topic we should talk about is it really necessary to include them in the standard? Like, do we really want like SNARK-friendly IBE or SNARK-friendly ABE in the standards to be included? I would say that's the starting point.
I would add to that that, like, I think in general, we may not want to say, you know, let's cover every possible sort of useful SNARK-friendly way of lifting the transformation or things like this, but it may be interesting to sort of show one more generic way of doing this. So the way that we were discussing with the commit and proof may be a way. I don't know if there is a way to generalize though, right? In some sense, we can specify in a standard that you need to make sure that the inputs are connected as sort of a fundamental component of making sure of proof of ensuring the integrity of the inputs to the SNARK. But I don't know if we can sort of generalize that, because in the encryption side you have like verifiable decryption, right, and encryption, whereas maybe in ABE and so on there is not always that sort of system.
So when you were talking about Jiwon, when
Yes.
you were talking about standardizing the more general scheme, were you talking about the ideas of using the randomization in the way you do in Saver?
I wouldn't say randomization would be a good standardizing point, because it's really specific functionality that is not required in various applications, I would say. So what I'm mentioning is that
right. It seems to be quite it seems to be quite specific to pairing-based preprocessing SNARKs.
Yeah, that's why I separated like the slide as in useful other functionalities and the main concept of SNARK-friendly encryption. So what I'm saying is with that, maybe should we standardize just the concept of the SNARK-friendly encryption to be detachable, like commit and proof? But other functionalities, I wouldn't say it's a good point for standardizing, no.
So by that, do you mean standardizing the security properties and a couple of specific schemes that meet them?
By the specific I mentioned is like some sort of primitives, like say, should we standardize SNARK-friendly IBE without any like other specific functionalities, just the IBE?
Okay.
And or like SNARK-friendly ABE, I don't know if it's really possible, but if it's possible.
It's pretty complicated.
Well, for IBE-based systems, I think it's possible. I kind of like wrote it down, and it seems possible because at least if you're using the pairing group inside encryption, it ends up like a message multiplied by some pairing group element inside the G to the T, group T. So
would you do the pairing inside the SNARK there, or can you do it outside the SNARK?
Of course, outside of the SNARK, you're connecting the IBE, say for example, outside of the SNARK.
that seems potentially useful to me. It maybe has some similarities to the recent paper on accumulation schemes, the PC AGM commitments.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, there is a lot of intersection between them.
What about the application? Does it, do we want to look specifically into voting? Are there any other useful use cases that are SNARK-friendly? Do we want to standardize an application?
So at this point, what I really want to ask to other audiences is that what we can think of as an specific applications that require the identity-based encryption to be inside the circuit. Let's say we need to prove the identity-based encryption. Where do we need this? Does someone have some examples they can provide, like some creative ideas where this kind of encryption is useful?
Like, you mean specific applications for IBE and ABE and stuff?
Yeah, for example, like that. Let's say just IBE then.
So we did consider proving the correctness of the encryption in Zcash. That this is the note encryption when you're sending a note to someone. And the reason we didn't do it was that we thought we would have to do the encryption inside the SNARK, and that was too expensive. So being able to do the encryption outside the SNARK and still prove it correct is a useful thing in that context. And it has some nice properties. It makes the what we call selective transparency stronger. So that's where you can selectively reveal information about your transactions. And you could prove, for example, that an auditor had all of the transactions involving a given key rather than just some of them.
Yeah, it sounds as like a good example as a standard, because Zcash is, everybody knows Zcash.
So there, correct me if I'm wrong, but so today the way that it works, right, with Zcash is that actually the receiver of the note will verify the commitment of the plaintext of the note itself.
That's correct, yes.
But that does not prevent from the sender from putting in sort of a garbage note into the actual blockchain state, right?
Correct.
So that, right, okay. So then this having a verifiable encryption would actually sort of at the consensus level prevent a sender from generating this.
Yeah, and if we could have done that cheaply in Sapling, we would have done it, but we didn't know how to at the time.
And do you see these this viable using sort of encrypt?
I haven't looked at the details insufficient.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Elgamal is obviously something that you can efficiently do. The difficulty for us was that at the time we only had encryption schemes that were not SNARK friendly. So things like CHA-20 is about as it's about as expensive as Blake 2B. So that would have been too expensive.
I understand. Okay.
But Dara, would it be sufficient to do the encryption inside the circuit? Because if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but in the receive algorithm, you need to decrypt the notes, and then you kind of need, so as Daniel said, to check that the plaintext is a valid opening of a commitment in the tree. But don't you need to verify that the value of the note matches the kind of contractual agreement that sender and recipient had of trade?
So you remember that the note commitment is in the clear, and it's hiding, so that's fine. And we do check that in the circuit. So this isn't a problem with the soundness or balance preservation or privacy of the protocol as it stands. It's just strengthening the selective transparency properties.
Right, but for instance, if I owe you one Zcash or whatever, then you need to make sure that the node which successfully opens the commitment in the tree is actually of value 1, right? Like so you need to make sure that I didn't send you 2 or like 0.5 or any other value.
Yeah, so at the moment, in order to receive a note, the sender has to have encrypted it correctly. If they don't encrypt it correctly, then it's as though they burnt the note.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right, thanks.
I mean, they didn't quite burn the note because they could also send you the information out of band. And that's actually what makes things difficult for an auditor, because an auditor can't tell whether you sent notes out of band.
Yeah, right.
For most auditing applications, it's okay anyway, because if the sender and recipient are colluding, they could just have used a different address.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I want to suggest an application. I'm very not up to the details of these sophisticated zero-knowledge snarks as you guys, so I'm not sure how better is this than other techniques that we have. But there is this notion of non-interactive, publicly verifiable secret sharing. Verifiable secret sharing means that I do a secret sharing to n people, and I need to prove that all the shares that I shared are all on the same polynomial, a Shamir polynomial. So that's verifiable secret sharing. Publicly verifiable secret sharing means that anyone watching the exchange can check that, not only the people receiving the shares. And non-interactive public secret verifiable secret sharing is doing exactly the same, but non-interactively. So I'm, as the dealer, send a message to each party or a broadcast, and now everyone needs from that message to understand that this was done correctly. So the way of doing is basically you publish some information about the polynomial, and then you send shares on a dedicated line to each person, right, to each shareholder. And I need to prove that the shares that I encrypted for party I mean, for each one of the party 1 to n, is consistent with the polynomial. Okay, so you need to verify the property that the shares that were encrypted to these different parties are all sitting in one polynomial. And definitely use this verifiable encryption, I mean, as a general primitive. And I would say that this is a very important application. For example, if we were to standardize multi-party computation, that would be definitely one primitive that you want to standardize, because it's common to many protocols. So anyway, the long story short is that for non-interactive publicly verifiable secret sharing, you need verifiable encryption, and I assume that something like this will be very useful for that. If you need the references, you can write to me.
I think Karim has a question about UC security.
Oh, I am currently sharing screens too, so I cannot really see the chat.
Oh, that's okay. Karim, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I can read it. Sorry. Yeah, the question is that did you consider UC security for your setting for Saber? Because
Okay.
if you are encrypting the witnesses and sending it, basically you have linear proof. So then if you use a non-malleable, let's say, proof, let's say Grot-Muller 17, basically you can achieve black box simulation extractability. And Grot in 2006 is shown that actually you can realize ideal functionality of NISCs by black box simulation extractable NISC. So I wanted to just ask that if you have considered this.
I think the Saber itself, when using Krawczyk, isn't it already achieving the black box extraction? But you're saying the simulation extractability, right?
Yes, because the case that if you use GROT, the proofs are malleable. But if you use GROT Muller, basically we again achieve black box extraction, but the proofs will be non-malleable.
Yeah, exactly. And you lose the re-randomization property. But you can actually gain the CCA property by letting the proof non-malleable. But the interesting thing is that if you're using the SC SNARK, we are not doomed. We can actually have some tweak to the re-randomization. If we, for the re-randomization, let's say you are giving out some additional parameters, like if you're familiar to the mathematical details, let's say G to the A to the delta, A multiplied by delta. If you have this specific parameter, you can just use it to only re-randomizing, but not maliciously altering the proof and witness.
But I would say that you know that GROT has a version, this Bowie-Gabor zone from 18, that without even changing the CRS you can achieve, but in the random oracle to simulation extractability. So, I mean, even you can with GROT, but a different version, slightly changing the verification and proof generation. I think you still can achieve black box simulation extractability. I mean, if you see there is a problem with re-randomization, if you use GROT Muller. Even LIPMA from 19 has a version which achieves simulation extractability, but that one has quite similar structure to CRS of GROT. So basically, maybe that can also help.
Yeah, so what I want to say is I totally agree with you. You can also consider using like GROT and Muller scheme, like just SC SNARKs. And also it can be used for even the re-randomization. That's what I wanted to tell you.
Okay. I thought that this is, sorry, I got it wrong there. I thought it's a problem. Okay, so you haven't considered yet, yes? I mean, this UC security.
I kind of considered it. We considered it, but we just didn't like make it as a standard protocol. So of course, I think it's really possible to do that, and that's an open work to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's possible. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So I'm wondering maybe like in terms of what a standard would look like, would you have in mind to, and maybe this is a question for everyone, to have sort of the abstraction of what it means to do this sort of disconnection of the encryption inside of the SNARK as an abstract protocol, just kind of outlining the requirements themselves? Or would you think of actually try to standardize the concrete way of doing it by Saver? Right, and I mean, it's a question we also asked for the commit and prove back then. It would mean also, it would entail, right, sort of standardizing the actual encryption scheme that you outlined and things like this. Yeah.
So my personal opinion is that it's better to standardize just the concept of the SNARK-friendly encryption. I mean, Saver is just a specific protocol which works for like only re-randomizations and some verifiable decryption property. So it's better to like standardize at least a general concept, like we are not building the specific protocol, but let's say we are just making some restrictions on the format. Let's say it should be in the like discrete log format to be connected to the SNARK, like that kind of example. I think that would be better to be plugged into other applications as well.
So do we have crisp security properties for what it means for a SNARK-friendly encryption to be secure? Is that in the paper?
Well, for the specific protocol Saver, we have it, but for the general SNARK-friendly encryption, I wouldn't say that, because if we come up with another protocol, then we need an individual security proof for that one. Because the thing is,
I wasn't talking about the security proof. I was talking about the security properties that it's supposed to satisfy.
Okay. Well, the properties, yeah, they are going to remain, but of course, without the re-randomization and verifiable decryption, there are like some like additional functionalities that we added to the Saver just to satisfy the voting system actually. So it can be just eliminated. But the core of the SNARK-friendly encryption, the properties all satisfy, I would say.
And how about for other things than encryption? Is there more work to do to make it work for the functionalities?
Other systems, as I mentioned, so the main focus is the connectivity, right? So we are connecting that we use the same input to both some system and this ZK SNARK. So I think that's the only thing actually we want to connect and satisfy for the property. The other thing just depends on the system.
Yeah, I think in the commit and prove, it's exactly the same, right? You want to make sure that essentially what you're proving, whatever property you're proving about the data is indeed what is in the opening of the commitment.
Yeah, exactly.
And we also have this work on accumulate and prove, right? So now we sort of show that you can also have proof of set membership disconnected from the actual SNARK circuit. And one of the interesting requirements that sort of come up here, and maybe specifically in one of the instances that we use, right, when we have an accumulator that is an RSA accumulator, then we're committing values inside of an RSA group, but the SNARK is actually sort of, you want to input a commitment or a value that is inside of a prime field group. Prime group, what we need to do is sort of prove this equivalence of committed values in different groups, right? So this is maybe something that is, I don't know if can be generalized, but maybe, yeah.
So do we need two separate working groups here rather than folding this into the commit and prove group? Is it sufficiently different?
That's definitely what I was thinking.
It's actually the one I made up for the topic as a discussion also. It's in the fourth one. So
okay.
Basically, it should be actually included in the commit and prove working group anyway, because fundamentally it should be included as just as carving the details of the commit and prove. So maybe we should consider doing them together within just one group, as in commit and prove system. But that's just an opinion. So I wanted to hear from the audience that if it should be included.
Should I create a poll on this?
Yeah.
I'll go for it. Okay. Trying to get there. It's taking a bit longer than I expected.
Okay, so maybe
change the slide to this one so that everybody can get it.
Yes.
Please continue the discussion, and then as soon as I have this, I'll publish the poll.
But what do the existing members of the commit and prove group think about this? I mean, we don't want to hijack their group by adding a bunch of other work to it that they're not keen on.
Are they in here right now? The commit and prove system working group?
I am, and I definitely think it's a good idea because there is some similarities. I mean, it wouldn't be bad to have sort of both abstractions there, and then this working group could work hand in hand with the SNARK primitives working group in order to make sure that kind of when you want to instantiate that protocol, you actually have something to use to make it happen.
So should we move on to the next topic while Daniel is preparing for the poll?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Let me see.
I had another question about the voting protocol. How does it compare to other end-to-end verifiable voting protocols?
Can you say that again?
How does VoteSaver compare to other end-to-end verifiable voting protocols?
What voting protocol you said? I didn't recognize the vocabulary.
So end-to-end verifiability means that the voter can verify the vote, and yeah.
So basically, VoteSaver is already including the end-to-end verifiability, but without the compromising the privacy to the authority. That's the main difference.
Right. There are other protocols that don't do that. So.
Did I understand correctly that for the voting protocol, like the ballot was actually encrypted, or did I miss completely the point?
Ballot is encrypted by using the saver's encryption, but the ballot does not contain the identity of the voter.
Right,
so,
I see.
Yeah, so the administrator who is responsible for the tallying, they are looking at, they can of course decrypt the votes because they have the secret key for the election. But even if they decrypt the vote, they are just looking at the result without who voted for who. They're just looking at the ballot paper, which does not include identity of the voter.
Okay.
So I was really asking about comparison with systems like Pressavote, Scantegrity, Helios, things like that.
Yeah, there are a lot of systems like that, and all the systems, like you said, are having the authority who is distributing the key at the end. So the authority at least knows where the vote is coming from. And also those systems are using the mixnet to mix the votes. So which means there are some mixnet, who is responsible for the mixnet, doing the mixnet is going to just end up knowing where the vote is coming from, of course.
Okay.
But don't we need to have like, I mean, I'm not familiar with the construct. I apologize if my question is not relevant, but don't we need to have extra properties on the encryption scheme? Because, I mean, we need to have like key privacy to protect the voter. So what's the threat model here? Have you proven ITCC of the encryption scheme you're using, or don't you need it?
So for the privacy of the voter in the VoteSaver, it's actually not implied by the encryption scheme's property. It's applied by the zero knowledge of the ZK-SNARK, because your secret key is a witness to the ZK-SNARK. But of course, encryption also has the semantic security, which is the indistinguishability. So if you, let's say you have two ciphertexts, but you cannot distinguish between them. But this is for the ballot itself without the identity. So this implies that when you're looking from the outside, when you don't have the election secret key, you cannot know the ballot and distinguish the ballot, which the ballot is from the voter.
Right. Okay. I think I need to have a look at the paper, but I was not necessarily arguing about NCCA here. I was really arguing about indistinguishability of the key which was used to do the encryption. But maybe I'm missing something. I'll have a look at the paper. It's going to be easier to answer all my questions. Thanks.
Okay, but if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. I would like to just explain it more easily because reading the paper is a pain, you know.
That's fine. No worries. I'll sit down and I read it. Thanks.
I mean, you mentioned key privacy. That is essential for Zcash because that's what we use for the anonymity in our protocol, or what we depend on. We also depend on the ZK.
Yeah, this is why I was asking. I was also interested in that, so yeah.
So for some reason, it's not allowing me to launch the poll. I think what happens is that the existing polls on the account are preloaded into the Zoom room once you start the Zoom. And now I can't launch anymore because I think 4 is the maximum. So I'll have to try to do something else about it, but maybe
you can use the primitive approach.
Yeah, let's pose the question. Okay. I don't know if 50 people may be raising their hands as easily as answering the poll.
So this is not going to be a secret ballot.
Yeah, we should use Saver, right? I think it may be reasonable to assume. I mean, does anybody have like a strong objection to joining the two working groups, to merging them? Okay. I'll spice it up a little more even. Does anybody have an objection, and I'm sure there will be, to also adding other sort of primitives to this working group? Maybe not necessarily in the first place, but maybe in later options like...
That's very vague.
Like
objection on grounds of vagueness.
Accumulate and prove, or IBE and prove, or secret sharing, verifiable secret sharing and prove, as Hugo was also explaining.
So the objection there would be overcomplication and insufficient evidence that people are actually going to use the more complicated schemes.
So there is some evidence that people are interested in accumulate and prove, because I think almost every single application does use it.
Yeah, definitely.
So maybe the question can be concrete and say, do we want to have a working group for 3 primitive abstractions, sort of try to find the common requirements and things like this, but does it make sense to have the 3 of them?
I mean, I think that's mostly a matter for the working group members, but I don't, that seems useful to me.
Okay.
I think it makes sense to start as a single working group to maximize the commonalities. And if it turns out that there is a divergence because they use different techniques for the different combinations, then you can always fork.
I mean, as far as interaction with the SNARK-friendly primitives group goes, I don't think that group was planning to standardize pairing-based stuff yet. Mind you, if you're doing the pairing outside the circuit, then maybe it's fine.
Yeah. So I think there is basically, you know, sort of the intersection here is to say, in some way, we need to get the 2 working groups, right? The primitives working group and this one, which we sort of need to make sure that the names are not also in common. So if we call them both of them SNARK-friendly primitives, we're going to be in a problem. One of them is about standardizing concrete instantiations of the primitives that are going to be used most likely in applications, but also in these sort of X and prove methodologies, right? So it seems good. It seems logical to me to say that if we're going to go for, say, commit and prove and encrypt and prove, that the primitives working group would have to take care to make sure that there is at least one instantiation of each, I mean, working in parallel, but together on this.
So the line of distinction would be between primitives running inside the SNARK constraint system versus primitives sitting on the side, like we've seen now.
It's a good point. I think.
So they're not quite sitting on the side because you're effectively doing part of them in the circuit and part of them outside.
You're doing something in the circuit, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
The question is, what are you doing in the circuit?
So that's a good question. In order to instantiate these schemes, what actually needs to be in the circuit? I may not have been paying sufficient attention to the math. Can we go back to that slide?
Which slide are you referring to?
The math part of the protocol. Okay. For no.
You mean the protocol?
Yeah.
Okay.
So not vote saver, the general thing. Yeah. So can you point out what goes in the circuit here? Or what changes need to be made to the proof system?
But here you cannot see anything that is going into the circuit because these messages are all just input to the SNARK. So what goes into the circuit is what arbitrary properties you want to prove for the message. So let's say, for example, it can be message is within the space from 1,000 to 2,000. I don't know. Well, maybe other properties that you want. So
okay, so that's well within the scope of what the SNARK-friendly primitives group is already doing, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay, so then I'll go back to the last slide.
So I think we have like 5 minutes left of discussion. Do the moderators have other? Yeah.
Okay, regarding Hugo's application before, I think I hijacked the discussion too quickly. So I think that was, at least for NPC people, this is a very interesting application. I'd like to hear more from people whether they have considered similar scenarios. What do they think about what Hugo suggested? Does this verifiability property pops up in other contexts?
So are we talking specifically about the kind of component of verifiable secret sharing and proving that sort of the shares are constructed correctly?
Yeah, Hugo explained it as a verifiable encryption, but yes.
I'm actually wondering if there is sort of another or an extended application in that respect where maybe now people want to prove something about the shares in zero knowledge, maybe using a SNARK or something. Is there any kind of application for that?
Yeah, well, you can, for example, if you do a resharing of a previous secret, you want to prove that you are sharing the same polynomial as before. Sometimes the shares are committed in some other way, and you want to prove. There are many cases for extending this to. You can think about this verifiable secret sharing actually as a distributed commitment. So most things that apply to commitment will apply to, but in this distributed scenario. So the verifiable encryption becomes very natural because the issue of non-interactivity is very important because you're doing it with different people.
So it occurs to me that there's a technique that's used in Zcash sapling that is quite similar in the sense that it moves a primitive that could have been done in the circuit outside in order to make it more efficient, and that's the red DSA signature in sapling. So the idea is that you can do a signature on, say, a hardware wallet that that authorizes spending a given note in a transaction, and then that is linked. The key is randomized, which it needs to be to preserve anonymity, and then the circuit links that randomized verifying key to the user's public key. So do we want to standardize things like that, either as part of this working group or separately? Because that's a generally applicable technique in any situation where you want to authorize something, but you aren't able to generate a proof on a particular device.
So I think maybe at this point it does make sense to sort of go back to the working group itself and start maybe some discussion there, outline all of these possibilities and really discuss it maybe in a follow-up meeting in a couple of weeks or something like this. Let people suggest maybe applications or specific constructions that are primitives that they would like to see in this model. And then let's have that discussion so that we can set up like the concrete scope for the working group. Does that make sense, Dara and Jiwon and the rest?
Yeah, sounds great.
I'd never actually thought about the technique that Zcash uses as sign and prove before, but that's basically what it is.
Good. So
I want to say two things. One is that auditing in general is a good application. For example, you commit to something now and you encrypt it maybe under a threshold escrow key in case that you will be audited in the future. Then you will need to open some stuff, some encryption. But at this point, you want to prove that you are encrypting the right thing, because otherwise, in 6 months when you're being audited, they will find out that actually you didn't commit to anything. So that's another place where I've seen applications to verifiable encryption. And one last thing, in the talk of Jiwon, he uses the word connecting. I think, I don't know if that's a word that has been established in this area, but I think the more suitable word is binding. Binding between the circuit and the SNARK. I mean, binding is used for similar things in other areas. So probably connecting is to use it for other things.
Okay, I think it's a good time to
go to the excellent next talk.
No, before, right?
No,
you can practice. You have time.
So I'm going to stop recording now, unless there is anyone who wants to have final words on this topic. Maybe thanks to Jiwon again and to the moderators. And thanks to Dara for taking notes. Okay, I'm stopping the recording.